Serious computer scientists have read what is the most unsettling / malicious piece of code that you've written or stumbled upon? In 1988, I was paid to write the following lines of code. The above lines were my contribution to the Y2K bug. And then in 1996, I was paid to fix those lines of code. You're welcome. A T83 calculator. Somebody I didn't like asked me to write them a program that will help them with our upcoming app calc test. I was working on one already and testing and debugging mine. So I took his calculator home with me over the weekend, explaining that it would take time to copy my code over to his calculator. The entire program was just 10 print I don't like you, 20 go to 10. When he ran it, the calculator was locked in a never-ending cascade of I don't like you until he took the batteries out. Once during 6th form, being immature and surrounded by idiots, I decided to write a program that spam launches Explorer. It was just a little throwback to the high school days where people would spam the Explorer button on the keyboards our school had during its lessons. Needless to say, the first person who fell for it spread it round our year group, caused a lot of computer crashes, and I narrowly avoided getting in trouble because the exact version that got sent around was not of my creation. I'm novice programmer at best. One of the programs we use at work was built by a contractor that hard-coded dates into their code instead, using a formula from the current date. As soon as we need to use dates past 2022, the program will error out. The date codes need to be replaced / fixed in at least dozen places, which may be more work than we will want to do. I don't know / not my department. Not sure what we will do if this issue pops up before a fix is produced. Most dates we use are a year out, some dates are 2 years out. This means the program will be mostly dead in less than 2 years. Of course I could be wrong. As I said, I'm only a novice programmer and they are the professionals. My first unsettling code experience was working as a intern for an at the time major online retailer. I was testing their ad referrals. The ads didn't pay anything on click, but what they were supposed to do is as follows. If a new user creates an account from your ad click, you would earn $1 and also 5% from their purchase for first 7 days. If it was an existing user and they added anything to the cart or purchased anything during the session, you'd get 5% as well. The thing is, no matter how I tried, I could not replicate the first scenario, meaning no commission was ever paid on sales outside of the initial session on new accounts. Now, as a lowly CAP person, all I was supposed to do was just file a bug report, but because I was a giant nerd, I instead just looked at the code and was going to find the bug and submit a report with this function here is bad. I had done that before and really wanted to make a good impression and turn the internship into a real job after college. Well, thing is, there was no code for tracking referrals past the initial session at all. Only users who clicked a link and bought something in that session paid referral fees. No logic existed at all for the cart addition if purchased later, or nothing existed at all to pay the supposed 7 days of purchases, if any. The company was underpaying advertisers massively, and it clearly wasn't an accident. I emailed my findings to my boss, who told me she'll follow up on it. Needless to say, nothing got fixed. Sysadmin here. Found a deadman switch once. If it detected a particular account was disabled, then it was set to redirect the backups to another location in such a way they'd keep being reported as successful. Wait a week, then wipe the file server before deleting itself. Put there by a former id consultant as insurance, I guess. Someone new takes over, and a week later everything explodes, but the new guy can't fix it. They call him back in, and he heroically saves the day. Too bad for him, he'd been fired literally years before I came along. Dumb fucker misspelled his account name, so the script had been patiently waiting for have a non-existent account be disabled. Whoops. Digital forensics student here. I saw a couple wild programs in my malware class. One of my favorites was a program designed to read the language setting of the victim machine. If it was Japanese, the malware uninstalled. If it was English or almost any other language, it displayed an ominous message, like "you're a lucky one." If it was Chinese, it tried to brick the computer. I never found out the story behind it, but I feel like there was one. That's some targeted rage. One of the more vicious ones I analyzed was designed to perpetuate itself, then wait for around 2 weeks before actually attacking. My official conclusion was that it waited to give the user time to grow complacent in case they suspected an infection, as well as obscure the actual infection vector by letting the trail get cold. I always thought there was something sinister about a virus that exploits people's desire to find nothing wrong. Back in the Windows 3, one day I wrote a program that would open every DLL in the Windows folder for writing, and then would close the fill handle, basically making every DLL 0 bytes in length. Anything loaded into memory would still work fine, but anything that wasn't was horribly screwed. Basically, this trashed Windows and required a reinstall to fix. You could never pull this off today without a user clicking OK on a dialog window a million times. I wrote it just to see if it would work as I expected, and it did. I had a few friends take this thing, without my knowledge at the time, and run it on display computers at Radio Shack. I'm sure it created a very bad day for those poor employees. Back in the heyday of Second Life, I was in a fairly interesting group called W Hat and later another group called V5, quite a fair bit before the 4chan crowd descended. I made a few different malicious pieces of code that harmed their platform, Cool Shows 2, 0, Excitilal, and an unnamed recursive object unpacker. Cool Shows was just a highly mutilated torus duplicated and linked together with slightly different rotations, such that it had an increased polygon count, and worn as a shoe, so that it would be beneath the geometry of the ground. My improvement on this was to put a small bit of code on each that would change the color and orientation of the textures, to force each polygon to red row as fast as possible. This changed the object from slowing people down to outright crashing their graphics card, processor, and eventually causing absurd. I avoided a similar fate by turning off all rendering outside the interface element. Edit. Oh, and I used a mostly transparent texture that was hooked into the rendering system, so that unless you disabled everything but the interface, you would instantly get hit by it. Thus you were unable to investigate the source. Excitilal was a slightly different beast. Second Life, being an adult game, had some enterprising users that set up an adult avatar adjustment product. In short, they sold fake dicks for your fake self. I, in turn, reverse engineered their product to figure out the protocol it used to talk between parts, and wrote a script to hijack their virtual bits. I don't think I've ever seen something quite so humorous as 100 virtual people go stiff as a board and having fake orgasms in a public PG-rated area. I'm pretty sure this got quite a few people banned. Of all the things I wrote, though, the most impactful was probably the unnamed recursive object unpacker. It was essentially just a virtual grey goo. One object that contained a copy of itself was placed inside a launcher. It would then spawn that copy repeatedly and give each child a copy of itself. Then, those children would go forth and do likewise. A friend of mine named Groovenstein Corvin asked for a copy for a project and he added a couple things. After all the children were spawned, the original object would make itself physical and apply an impulse to itself while making an obnoxious sound. This resulted in over 200 servers getting firewalled off and crashed. Because I transmitted the source in a back channel, a messenger, they never discovered how he learned this or who he learned it from. Edit. The original intent of the script was in fact to make an unobtrusive listening device that would circumvent object permissions in a location. Temporary objects could still be resed even on parcels that disallowed permanent objects. Such objects would last at least 30 seconds, and at most 2 minutes. By making a object ping pong between copies every 30 seconds, it circumvented the limits, allowing me to spy on people remotely. I was later, deservedly, banned for an unrelated event involving giant virtual dog penises. Edit. In hindsight, being such a little jit was a really stupid move, as was provoking the person who owned the plot next to my store. Those virtual dog penises made me over 30 grand in real life money over the course of a few years. Frisbee flush, though. Malicious in the sense that it added nothing to the project, but let the prof know how little one of the group members of the senior project did. We were on 5 group projects together all last year of college. Had 90% the same classes and a club one as well. Let's call him Josh, cause that was his name. The short story is that he didn't have a line of code in our 100+ hours senior project, and I had just watched him revert all of my contributions to another class's project. 5 minutes before we were presenting it at the Texpo all day, where we were also doing the senior project and supposed to have booths next to each other so we could work both, but someone, Josh, forgot to submit that booth to be set up. He had also given my incorrect phone hash to a classmate on the other project who tried to call me all night, wondered why I wasn't responding. And it's the other guy's fault for never emailing me /fb/ come knock on my damn door cause he had all the info to do any of that. Anyways, the code I later committed to the JIT project was about 20 lines in our senior project, an AO robot who gave a spiel about how cool our department was to recruiting students. Except now it had about 4 minutes of also talking about how Josh did nothing for the project and was horribly incompetent. I know the prof ran it too, but well after grades and stuff were posted. He had called me months later and was asking how to run the program. Made sure he had the latest version when he did. Fun little thing for the next class to clean up. I remember playing with the Windows batch coding, and I accidentally made an automatic starting script with a loop that kept launching PowerShell and did some weird stuff to the screen. The loop repeated so many times my screen looked like a gateway to hell. After 26, Windows crashed. With the OS frozen I couldn't do anything. The only solution was to unplug the computer. Next time it booted, the script had started again. The S*** was so disturbing I was afraid to start to boot the computer again. Of course. 14-year-old me never heard of safe boot and I have Debian since then. Unsettling. I remember finding a bit of code in Adder that called a C function to bypass privacy and modify the internals of the object directly. It was a hack to change something in the processing flow. Instead of weaving the new functionality in, he waited until the processing was done and shoved the desired results in. I was tasked with a total rewrite where the outputs had to match with the legacy code. Because the hack was post-processing I couldn't make it bit perfect unless I emulated the hack. My PM made me do it. Not really that malicious. When I was at 6th form, I wrote 4 little apps that would be perhaps described as irritating, although one may have been a little malicious. 1. While true, print CHR. 7. Basically this would give the computer a system beep constantly. When you were running it with a normal alphanumeric character, you could easily break out of the program. However, with the beep character, you couldn't. My theory was that it took longer for the speaker to produce the beep than it took for the computer to print the beep. Only way out of it really was to reboot the computer. 2. A program that would run and just sit there and wait for 10 minutes up to 1 hour before opening and closing the CD drive. It would then half that time and do it again and half it again until it was opening every minute. The program was hidden in Windows as Explorer X, so you weren't really able to close it easily. 3. Perhaps this was a little malicious, on a par with going to the furthest extreme cell in Excel and type a full stop. When opened, it would just send hundreds of blank pages to the printer. Not usually a problem, but when you were in an environment that would charge 5p per printout on a print account system, it would cause irritation. 4. The most malicious, a program that would copy the login page when you locked your computer. When you typed your password in and hit enter, it would close, making it looked like you had unlocked your machine. In reality though, it would also send your password to the printer. Moral of that one is, lock your computers people. I was a sysadmin, doing testing on a government contracted website. After a recent code push from our developers, we were getting ready to send out emails to 600 users, one of our biggest groups to use the site. At that time, I'm the one sending the email, thankfully with my boss looking over my shoulder. A message pops up something along the lines of this will send 1000 plus emails. Do you want to continue? I ask my boss and he says yes, since the number was close to the 600 and some users would receive multiple emails for different tasks. Emails send in the next morning. Our help desk is bombarded with emails and phone calls regarding spam emails sent from our system. Apparently, the code was either missing or had an addition plus in the line that generates the email recipients, and every subsequent email sent to the next user in the list appended all prior recipients. The first user in the email list received 600, second received 599, and down the line. The higher ups of the program were far from happy as we were still building a user base and just scared off the largest group of users we were trying to get into the system. This might be malicious, but mostly the guy I worked with was a knob. I wrote a script and hid it in the terminal server session startup of each desk supervisor. Every time they logged in, it would change a specific user's ad name from Stephen Lee to Stephen Rebecca Lee. The only time it was noticeable was when he used the start menu on a Windows XP or older machine and it drove him insane. He'd send an IT request for it to be fixed. Someone would fix it, and by the next time he started his shift, it was back. I didn't take much care to hide that I had no hit the script there, so either the IT admin team were awful, or they never looked at the root cause of the issue. This will probably be the most computer illiterate comment here, but I swear on my life it's true. When I was 10 I took a basic programming course at the local college over the summer. The Apple desktop, Apple II Core E, was pretty new. That class took us all the way into higher ease graphics. Come time to register classes for 6th grade, they offered an intro to computers course. Programming on an Apple. My first day I got in and turned on the computer. Figured I'd screw around, show off to the instructor and just type the beautiful 2 lines of code that every computer nerd loved to screw with people with. 10 print whatever. 20 go to 10. The instructor was totally computer illiterate. Had no clue how to make it stop. I did this a couple days a week for the entire course. She never did know what was happening.